been targeting of people who are API. There's been that type of hatred that has come from people at the top of this country, national leadership, which has sent a message of hatred that has been felt by API members of our community. And that has led to an increase in violence. And we condemn it. That is not who this neighborhood is. That is not who our city is. So the first speaker that I'm going to introduce is a community leader who works with, for years, Southeast Asian members of our community. The most recent victim of this violence was Southeast Asian. We know that this is an incredibly diverse community. Over a third of the people who live in this community are API, and they need to be supported and protected. Judy Young from the Southeast Asian Development Center.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Judy Young. I'm the Executive Director of the Southeast Asian Development Center, formerly Vietnamese Youth Development Center. Can you hear? Yeah. I'm Judy Young. I'm the Executive Director of the Vietnamese Youth Development Center, formerly, now the Southeast Asian Development Center. I am upset and appalled at the recent incident of attack on our Vietnamese elder 2 weeks ago. This should not happen to our elders.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear?
No.
Okay. Right into it? Right here? Okay. All right, I'm gonna try my best. It's kind of hard with the mask on. Don't worry about it. Okay. So I'm really upset and appalled by the incident and the attack. I've lived and worked in this neighborhood for 40 years, and I have never seen this increase in violence and attack on our community members. Okay, since shelter in place, our Lao, Cambodian, and Vietnamese elders and families have lived in fear, have lived in isolation. They've struggled daily to make ends meet. And for them to be able to not go out in the street and fear someone's going to attack them, that is unacceptable. We do not tolerate violence to folks who are walking and living and struggling to make their daily lives here in the neighborhood. Okay? We want the violence stopped. We are going to do what it takes to make sure that those who are responsible is held accountable for this attack, and make sure no other elder or woman walking on the street is going to be attacked because of their gender, because of their identity. Okay? No one's going to get attacked on our watch. We want to stand together and condemn this violence and this attack. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for your leadership. Next, I'm going to introduce the co-executive director of CAA, who has been leading a campaign around Stop AAPI Hate. As I said, we've seen a rise in hate crimes, hate attacks against our AAPI community, and we are coming together united under the leadership of many of the organizations here to fight against it. Cynthia Choi from CAA.
Well, first I want to respond by saying that I'm deeply saddened as a resident of this city, as someone who has a mother in her 70s and who's trying to raise her family in this city. As it's been said before, no one should fear being able to walk outside. We're in a pandemic. Those are the few things that we're able to do as essential workers, to get outside, to get exercise. And if your response to this crime is that you shouldn't be out early in the morning or late at night or carrying your purse, that's the wrong answer. CAA is a part of a coalition, including Community Youth Center, Chinese Progressive Association, and other community leaders who came together over a year ago because, quite frankly, we were tired of coming together around these tragic incidents. Time and time again, we saw that survivors and their families weren't getting culturally appropriate services that they need and that they're entitled to. We need to stop that, and we need to better serve survivors. Our goals are very simple. We need to better serve survivors and their families and all the services that they're going to need beyond the time that their wounds are healed. Secondly, We need to have better coordinated services where community groups are working with city agencies to ensure that there is accountability and the appropriate measures taken, including prevention and community-based efforts. And then thirdly, we do need to equip residents in impacted neighborhoods that have a disproportionate number of violence. They're the ones who have stake in the community, and they are the ones that we need to work with to develop solutions. Finally, what I'd like to say is that the city just recently allocated support for our coalition efforts, thanks to our board members, including Aaron Peskin and Matt Haney, and other board members, because they know that these incidents continue to occur and we have to do something, and that starts today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. As I mentioned, this is an incredibly diverse community here in the Tenderloin with a very large population of API residents. This is among the most diverse communities in the city, and we care about each other, we look out for each other, and when members of our community are attacked, we come together united to fight against that. I want to introduce a resident from the Tenderloin Chinese Rights Association, Sue Cheng.
Good morning, everyone. On this COVID-19 period, and this very small place, a lot of people, make everybody is very stressful. So we don't want that happen again. We don't want any attack for anyone. So I hope we can support the mental healthy San Francisco right away to support that. 大家好，我係小張，我呢就係喺呢個區呢就已經係做咗工已經有10幾年㗎啦。咁我哋呢個區呢，而家因為呢個新冠病毒嘅期間呢，令到所有嘅人喺呢個咁細嘅地方、咁多人居住嘅地方呢，個個呢都個壓力都係好大㗎。咁所以呢，我哋呢就希望政府能夠實在咁樣成立嗰個叫做精神健康三藩市，令到我哋嘅社區啲有精神病嘅人呢能夠得到支持嘅。多謝大家。
Thank you, Sue, and I want to recognize all of the members of the Tenderloin Chinese Rights Association who are here with us today. Many of them live within blocks of here. They walk this neighborhood every day. They come and use this park, and they should always be able to do so safely. The next person I want to introduce is someone I first want to thank, because when this latest attack happened, I reached out to him, and he was immediately on top of it, making sure that victims support services were available for the family, holding the individual accountable, following up with the family in the office, and I appreciate his advocacy for victim services that are culturally relevant and competent. Chesa Boudin, our district attorney.
Thank you, Supervisor Haney. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. It's an honor to stand here with our city leadership, with our community leaders, to denounce the kind of random acts of violence that sadly leave many of our most vulnerable victims trapped in their own homes. With regard to the case that Supervisor Haney just mentioned, I'm appreciative of the work that the San Francisco Police Department did in finding the individual we believe committed these 2 recent assaults. Just yesterday, one of my assistant district attorneys persuaded a judge to detain that man in jail pending trial, and we will not release him until we are confident he can safely be released. We need residents in this neighborhood and everywhere in this city to feel safe, to be safe, and we will do whatever it takes to make them safe. We will work together. We don't have the tools individually, but collectively we can and we will make this neighborhood and this city safer for all of us. I'm proud of the work my victim services team has done to support crime victims, and we will continue to do everything in our power to heal the harm and the fear and the trauma that this kind of random, hateful, and unjustifiable violence plays in our communities. Enough is enough. We must demand more of ourselves. We are better than this. We will not be dragged down by the hatred coming from Washington. We will not be torn apart by differences in race or in creed or in faith. We are one city, we are one people, and we will rise above the violence and the hate. We will be safer in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Boudin, for your leadership. I also want to recognize, as the DA did, the captain of our Tenderloin station is here, hard at work, Captain Fabry. And you'll see there are officers around here. We've been working together. He's been responsive on these incidents and very aware and committed to making sure that people can walk the streets here safely, to address the rise in attacks on our API elders specifically. When we decided to come together and work on this issue and bring action, one of the first people I called was Supervisor Peskin, who represents Chinatown, who represents the district just blocks from here, because he has been leading on this issue and fighting for real changes, real resources for years. Thank you for being with us, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Supervisor Haney. Thank you, District Attorney Boudin. Thank you, Captain Fabry, and to the officers, working men and women of the SFPD. You've heard a lot, but I just want to start by really thanking the community in all of its aspects for holding us accountable, for being outraged by this brutal set of assaults, for telling us all the truth, which is that hate crimes are on the rise in San Francisco, about making us face the fact that even though we all believe we come from a tolerant, loving community, these attacks are on the rise. They are aimed at people of color. They are aimed at our seniors. They are hate crimes. They are elder abuse. But I want to thank the community, because the community is outraged, and the community is holding this supervisor accountable and this district attorney accountable. And that has got to continue. We also have to hold the courts accountable. I have attended in previous assaults, actually sat in the Superior Court and looked at that jury and looked at that judge. And that's the kind of work we're going to have to do together. I also want to thank the community, because as these assaults were on the rise, the community came to us in the worst budget year that I have personally experienced in the 20 years that I've been a member of the Board of Supervisors on and off. And they came forward with a package that we just passed 2 weeks ago for the victims of assault. And I say that as somebody who was assaulted. My wife and I were assaulted, mugged, and thankfully we came out of that okay. But it was very traumatic for me for a long time. And the trauma is more than just the physical trauma. The trauma is emotional trauma. And having those services in a culturally competent manner, in language, is profoundly important. And Supervisor Haney and I are going to get that money out of the door into the hands of competent organizations and professionals so that the healing can begin. But meanwhile, let's be clear. If you want to commit one of these assaults in San Francisco, Carl Fabry and his officers are going to apprehend you. This district attorney is going to charge you, and the courts down the street are going to make sure that justice is served.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. You know, I think that there was only one response when we heard about this attack, which was outrage and anger. You know, I just want to take a moment and all of us send our thoughts and prayers to the victims, to their families. This is something that, as Supervisor Peskin says, has traumatic effects that go even longer and beyond the physical impact, which in this case were brutal and horrific. So I want to introduce our next speaker, because what has too often happened is that crimes against API community, crimes against our seniors, often hate crimes, are ignored and not acknowledged, and there is no strategy to stop them. We are committing today, and we've committed in this budget process this year, to change that. And one of the big reasons why that has happened is because the leadership of Sarah Wan from CYC. So I want to introduce Sarah to come and speak. Where is she now?
Thank you, Supervisor. CYC Community Youth Center has been providing service to a lot of survivors of this horrendous incidents in the past. And this year has been escalating to a point that we really have to say enough is enough. It's not a Chinatown issue, it's not a Tenderloin issue, it's a citywide issue. We as a community need to stand together to offer culturally competent victim support services to all the survivors, as well as to develop violence prevention strategies as a community together. Not only by community leader, but also with city leader for the whole city coordinate together. And we're really thrilled to be part of the Community Public Safety and Justice Coalition that we really look forward to launch a long-term work. That's no quick fix. It will be a long-term battle, and we are committed to make changes for this community with everybody here. Thank you.
And our last speaker, who I want to introduce, has been working on bringing together all of the organizations to focus on violence prevention, to focus on stopping violence against the API community. That's Callie Wong from the API Council.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin and Haney, for hosting today's press conference. We are here today because of the outrageous acts of violence against our seniors are not new. It's part of a pattern of abuses that have systematically increased across the country, and especially during this pandemic. API Council represents 56 direct service nonprofits serving over 300,000 residents of San Francisco. And on behalf of the Council, we stand on protecting our elders at all costs. Public safety is a basic human right. We need to ensure that the most vulnerable members of our community should feel as safe as possible when walking down the streets. We are living during a time when acts of violence against Asians and especially seniors have become a commonplace. Many in our community feel like they are targets and no longer feel safe. This is in itself a crisis, and we must take collective action. It has become incumbent upon our community-based organizations to provide support for those who have become victims. We know this all too well when an elderly gentleman in the Bayview was robbed of his cans, assaulted, and mocked while being filmed. Our API community is fiercely protective of its own, and we intend to provide whatever support and resources that are needed. What we can do now is triage our resources to help the victims. We can hold parties accountable to the full extent of the law, and we can begin to work on a plan that will prevent this from happening in our city. What our elders experience is horrific, and the lasting trauma that the victims and their families experience is a scar on San Francisco. I believe that we can work towards healing, and I believe that has to start with us here in our community. Thank you.
So we have actually one more speaker, but I also want to shout out some of the other folks who are here. You see people here behind us from the CARE team who are here with the red vests. You see folks over there from Urban Alchemy, our practitioners there. I saw some people here from Safe Passage. And what you'll see all around you here are the people who are also out there working to make us safe. And the fact that they are here and they're hearing us and they're joining in this commitment to keep this community safe, to look out for our elders, to look out for our API residents who have been targeted. They're also here, and they're a part of keeping us safe, along with our police, along with our district attorney. We've got our Boys and Girls Club here as well. All of us here who are a part of this community have a responsibility to each other. That's the police, that's the district attorney, that's everyone standing up here, and that's all of us who are standing out there as well. Our last speaker I want to introduce from the Chinese Progressive Association, Lei Wu.
Thank you, Supervisor Haney and Supervisor Peskin, for inviting me. My name is Lei Wu. I'm the Policy and Alliance Director at Chinese Progressive Association. I want to first say that CPA absolutely condemns these violent attacks against our Asian American communities, especially our elderly and our women. I am here to call for justice for the victims, but specifically to the elderly women and to the families. I cannot imagine how much hurt and how pained you feel by what you experience. And to the families, I want you to know that you are not alone and that we are with you. Our grandparents, my grandparents, our nieces, our uncles, they step outside their front doors every day fearful that they may be the next one targeted. I do not want this life for our people. We do not want this life for our people. And we've seen this troubling trend of violence towards our folks, this violence fueled by the divisive politics and the rising racial tension in our city. We also ask that Michael Turner remain in custody for his safety and for the safety of others, and that he receives the mental health services that he may need. For almost 50 years, CPA's work has centered around advancing the living conditions of our Chinese immigrant communities in San Francisco. And as a member of the Coalition of Community Safety and Justice, we understand that violence is a symptom of deeper attacks that our communities face. We see it in the last few months of COVID, more crimes and actions by poverty and prejudice in our neighborhoods. And for all of us, our immigrant and working families, our Chinese, Black, and Latinx, to be really safe, we need to respond to these actions, or these violent crimes swiftly, and we need to address the root causes of violence. We see that these actions not only harm the physical and emotional security of our communities, but it deepens the existing racial divide between our Asian and Black communities. With every action, our communities are hurt and are traumatized, and we know that the pain will only be passed on to our children and to future generations. Until our communities are able to access justice, our communities are able to heal from their attacks and be safe. And just as our communities are hurt, we know other communities of color face violence in their daily lives, and they too will need to heal from their trauma and pain. No matter where we come from, what we look like, most of us just want to make it through our lives, not fearing for the safety of people that we love. In a time of increasing divide, we must come together to fight for the neighborhoods that we all need. Ones where we trust our neighbors regardless of what we look like, regardless of whether we speak the same language. Ones where we have organizations and services that we all can get support from. So I ask you all, let's come together and make sure we advocate for long-term solutions that prevent violence for our Asian American communities and for everybody. Thank you.
I just want, because now we've got a lot of people who've gathered here. I want to just be very clear about why we're here. Here in the Tenderloin, there have been some elders in our community, people who've lived here for a long time, who've been walking down the street, doing nothing wrong, just with their family, going to the store, and they've been senselessly and brutally attacked. And what we are out here to say is that that's not who we are, that's not who this neighborhood is, and that all of us have a responsibility to stand against that and to stop it. I heard there were some folks who were walking by who were asking what happened. Some of them walked away. And I heard as they found out what had happened, they said to each other, "You can't do that. That's not okay. That's wrong." And that's what we're here to say. That's the message. And we are going to fight however we can to stop it, to have justice and accountability for the victims, to make sure that the victims get appropriate services and are connected to those services, and that we prevent this from happening to anyone again in the future. Working with our police, working with our community organizations, working with everybody who is out here, we are going to put a stop to this hate-motivated violence here in this community and all over the city. The very last speaker who's going to close us out, and I promise this is going to close us out, is someone who has a long history of working on violence prevention, worked in the district attorney's office, is a candidate for District 1 Supervisor Connie Chan.
Thank you. You know, for a long time, I started out as a community organizer in San Francisco SAFE, raising crime prevention awareness, but specifically to the Chinese-speaking community, because I really played a role as interpreter and translator, and then the same role at the district attorney's office when Kamala Harris was our DA. What I learned from my experience then, it continues today. It is not just enough to just translate our language and our materials. It's also about cultural competency in victim services. It's a very scary process for any victims when they became victims of crime, because it's not just at the moment when the crime occurs. to think about the whole entire court process. At times, as victims, they actually have to attend court hearings. And that sometimes it's a long period of time. And to think about the fact that they have to live in fear for that long until they see the arrest is being made, as prosecution is being made, and that someone is being put away for the crime that they have done against them. And that requires a lot of care, a lot of support, not just from the district attorney's office, but also all these people behind me as a community to continue to support them and provide language competency and cultural competency supports and services for them. So here I am urging for our city to continue to consider provides resources and funding for not just when the crime occurs, but throughout that process of the prosecution and court hearing. And we need to continue to stand behind them, because even when the case is closed, that trauma continues, and that support needs to also continue. So thank you so much, and I look forward to having your support.
Thank you all again to all of the speakers and organizations. We are going to be working together. We've got roundtables planned to come together with the next steps. There's already been budget allocations approved, but all of that needs to happen right away, and we will all also be there for the victims and commit ourselves to prevent this sort of violence against API elders and violence against anybody in our community. Thank you all so much for coming.